Hi, everyone, and welcome to the QuitCast. My name is Becca, and today we're going to be talking about being an intuitive writer again, because we've had some questions that have come in specifically from TikTok, and I wanted to answer a couple of them about the intuitive writer content. So if you haven't read the book yet, you won't know, but there's this whole section on certainty seeking, specifically about certainty and correctness. And there's a video that we did about this. I'll link to it if you haven't seen it yet. But essentially in the video, because we were talking about certainty, then I started doing some content about certainty. And one of the videos that I did said, you need to find some templates for how to shortcut certainty for yourself. And the question was essentially like, I'm a bread machine writer. I do not intentionally plot before I write. I discover and I need to think about things before I can have certainty. And so how do I find these templates? What are they? So I wanted to go over a couple of them today, just so that we can have a video to point to when we get these questions, because we get them a lot. Both in coaching and on, comments on the QuitCast and on our social media channels and stuff. So here are a few ideas for how to do this. First of all, if you haven't yet downloaded the Stuck List PDF workbook that we have, I'm going to put a link in the show notes. I'm going to encourage you to download that and fill it out, because one of the biggest templates that you can have for how to get unstuck in your manuscript when you do is to look back at what has unstuck you in the past. Because often we try everything and everything and everything and everything that everyone suggests, and we don't try the intuitive thing that we know we should try. And often it's the intuitive thing we know we should try that ends up getting us unstuck. And so the Stuck List workbook helps you work through what has worked for you in the past, and then come up with a list of things to do for yourself that consistently work and that fix the problem. So specifically, the question that got asked was in regards to when I'm not feeling certain about something and I want to shortcut my way to certainty. And the answer that I gave, and I'll link to that as well in case you want to go and watch it, but the answer that I gave was about how to utilize character templates as a way of shortcutting certainty for yourself. The reason I suggest this is not because I think you have to start from templates in order for them to work, but rather that forcing yourself to put a data point on a line anytime about anything with certainty seeking strengths, or with just a certainty seeking personality where you would think, I need to do this right. This needs to be right. Or I need to get it right. Like there's a right that I have to discover. When you have that type of a personality, then that means that you need to find certainty as quickly as possible. And usually the way you get to that certainty is either by thinking over and over and over and over something, right? The CliftonStrengths intellection theme, or by analyzing all of the data in front of you, the analytical theme, and looking for patterns, or by the strategic theme, right, where you may get stuck without realizing it. And usually you either have to go backwards and read in order to watch the ramp that you built unintentionally, or you need to talk to someone about it. And what all of these things do is they force you to put a point on a line and say, this is what I think should happen. And then you check in with your intuition, essentially. Because if you say, like, I'll give you an example. It's very common that in coaching, when people talk about being stuck, that I'll start throwing out ideas at them, not because I think they need to take my ideas, but because having a point on a line to say yes or no to helps certainty shortcut itself. Like if Becca says, what if you had them do this? And your immediate response is, no, they cannot do that. And I ask why, then it forces your intuitive brain to come up with a reason based on what you know about the character. And sometimes you're reaching for data internally that you don't even know you know. It's super subconsciously hidden because it's part of the melee of information, right? Like the whirlwind of information that we know and don't have access to, because we have access to very little, especially the more intuitive of a writer we are. We're conscious of very little of the information that we actually know. So sometimes we have to reach down into that soup and pull out, or whirlwind, or whatever the metaphor, right? And pull out the piece of information that we need to say, no, I don't think she would do that because she's not this, or because she is this, or she has this, or needs this. Because so often the talking to another person or having someone else throw ideas at you is not actually about the person being right. It's about them being wrong and you discovering that they're wrong. And if you've ever brainstormed with somebody who is a highly intuitive or discovery or bread machine writer, you know that they will often just be like, nope, that's definitely not it. And they didn't tell you that about the character. Like they didn't include that in the information they were delivering, but your talking to them helped them uncover it. And so that's often what we need. The reason that we encourage like strategic, empathy, specifically those two, but individualization can happen. This can happen, adaptability, activator. These are all CliftonStrengths themes. And if you haven't heard about the CliftonStrengths assessment before, that's the thing that we use to coach writers. It's a psychometric assessment that's based on success patterns that have been studied for decades, and it's the most valid psychometric assessment we've ever found before. And that's why we utilize it, because it's extremely nuanced and very specific, and it helps us to figure out exactly what's going on in your brain. But the reason that I reference the CliftonStrengths themes is because each one of them has a particular type of certainty that it's looking for or that it creates. And so we want to be able to pick those out and utilize those things. So when a strategic or an empathy, individualization, adaptability, sometimes developer, right, can have some of this. When those strengths are seeking certainty, they're often very unconscious about where their information comes from. And so we really have to sometimes push those strengths either by talking to someone and utilizing that, their certainty, and you arguing with their certainty because you know it's not right for the character. That in itself can be a really great template to get unstuck. I am one of these writers. I have to call, and I apologize to them profusely, but I have 3 or 4 friends that I will call, and I'll just be like, hey, can you chat on text? Can you chat right now? And then they'll say yes or no. And then I say, here's what I'm struggling with, please, throw some ideas at me, or let's talk about this. And they ask me questions because I know that subconsciously I understand the characters. I just can't make the conscious decision-making part happen. So sometimes the talking helps me to reach down into my subconscious whirlwind or soup and pull out the actual right piece of information that I need to continue. Sometimes, though, it's going back and reading what you have written in the past, because you are subconsciously leaving clues that you may not even be aware of, that when you reread what you've written, you'll see that the clues are there. It's one of the reasons why I stand up so vehemently for people who need to edit as they go, or who need to go back and read what they've written. And there's so much advice out there about don't think about it, just keep going, don't think, just keep going. And when that works for you, that's great. But when you're the type of writer who really does not remember, or needs the jogging of the memory, or lays things so subconsciously you don't even know that they're there, right? Like when you're that type of person and you need to go back and read, you have to feel like it's okay for you to do that. And again, that's why we make this content. That's literally the purpose of this YouTube channel, is to say this thing that you're doing that you think is so weird is probably really, really normal. There's probably a good reason you're doing it, and we just want you to keep doing that. So the major templates that we've talked about so far are, again, talking to someone who can either throw ideas at you or ask you questions, and that may be uncomfortable, right? Because you don't necessarily want to take everybody's ideas, or you don't want to bother people. But I'm encouraging you, like, if that's what works for you, then continue to find people that like build relationships with people that can help you in that way. And yes, help them back, and be there for them and that sort of thing. Like, build a friendship if you want to, but it's also one of the reasons that we offer ideas coaching, is because sometimes all you want to do is not have to think about repaying someone for helping you. And you want to just do like 10 minutes in a micro coaching session and say, hey, I need help getting unstuck from this thing. And then you spend 10 minutes with the coach just ideating about what might be able to happen. And then you have to say, no, that won't happen. So that's an option as well. And if any of these things you're wondering about, you can always email us, manager@betterfasteracademy.com, and just let Angela know that you have heard about this thing in the video and you want to know more about it. That's fine. We get that Q&A a lot. We also do have an FAQ section on our website, and I'll try to remember to link to that. But so that's a major one, is talking to other people. Another of the templates we discussed was going back and reading what you've already written just to see if the clues are there. But there's another piece that I want to suggest. And of course, I forgot to bring this book with me when I was going to record this. I always end up remembering Tammy Cowden, but I forget that there's like 3 other authors on that book. So to all of the other authors on the book, I'm going to learn all of your names so that I'm not just shortcutting. But there is a book called 16 Master Archetypes, Heroes and Heroines, I think is what it's called. 16 Master Archetypes. And the reason I suggest, when you get stuck sometimes, going to either this particular book, which is an Archetypes of Characters book, or potentially something like the Strengths cards, or the Myers-Briggs, the Strengths, CliftonStrengths Finder 30, there's 34 different strengths. And they sell discovery cards, I think they're called, that have each of the personality themes explained on them. And then the Myers-Briggs or a Jungian test, the DISC, or the Enneagram as well, could all be potential sources of getting unstuck in this way. But so often what happens when we get stuck, and it's a character-driven reason that we're stuck, is we need something to jog us out of that place by reminding us what the character would do, or by about helping us discover what the character would do. So if you look at, let's just take the Enneagram as an example. If you look at the 9 different types on the Enneagram wheel, and you would say, okay, I know my character does these 3 things. And then you go looking in those archetypes for those 3 words, and you might, let's say they land on a 7, and you'd say, this is what a 7 would do, and these are the words that are in a 7. And then it will often give you, especially if you go to the right places, like there's a nonfiction author, Claire Taylor, I think it's under Claire Taylor, but Claire Taylor, who talks about the Enneagram and characters. And I think her Instagram is Claire or whatevs. And she talks about, like, here's what a particular character who is a 7 might do. And you'll see her give all these examples. And you can also look at just like the Enneagram definitions, because they'll say 7s will do this, 7s will do that, 7s will do that. And if you see those traits that you know your character has because you've been writing them, and you're like, oh, this is a 7, let me go look at that. And you see them say, like, 7s will, leave all their responsibilities behind because they just want to have fun. And then that might snap something in your head of like, oh, wait, but she's not like that. Instead of doing that, like, she might be fun and carefree and exciting, but she's not going to leave her responsibility behind. Why? Why wouldn't she? Because, and then the way your brain answers that question, why wouldn't she leave all of her responsibilities behind? She has a little sister that she has to protect. And when you pull that information up out of your subconscious, it can really, really help you to have that information that you didn't know you knew until you really needed it. So you're stuck, you don't know where you need to go, but you know that there's something that's not quite right. And instead of just thinking, well, what would she do? What would she do? That's an open-ended question. Like, we don't want to ask open-ended questions. Generally speaking, if you are, and I'll name the strengths and then also say a bread machine writer and other archetypes, which the archetypes we're still working on the content for, they're coming Keep following along. We'll continue to release information about that. It's what we're doing our summer conference on this year. And so if you're really super interested, email manager@betterfasteracademy.com. I think we still have a couple of slots in the virtual summer conference, but just know that's coming. So when you are a particular type of writer who needs certainty, but you can't see forward in the book from where you are, like there's something that you don't know, we need you not to ask yourself rhetorical questions or open-ended questions. So intellection, input, analytical, strategic, and context in the CliftonStrengths Finder. If you are a bred machine writer or identify as an intuitive writer or a discovery writer, or again, like just in general, if you are a certainty-seeking person, you like to know things for certain, you want to have the answers, then we want you not to ask open-ended questions. Well, what would she do? What would she do? Because the answer to that is, I don't know. And we already know you don't know the answer to that. So we want to try to shortcut that process of the open-ended question by giving you some very specific data points to have to respond to. If I see that there's a pattern of particular behavior with a 5 Enneagram or with a high analytical in the Strengths Finder, where they're extremely, extremely certainty seeking and they can't exist in that uncertainty, then it's possible that if you're writing a character like that, the reason that they're so stuck is because they're actually stuck internally, and you need to do something to them from the outside that they have to respond to, because that is how human behavior patterns happen. When you're uncertain and you need to make an answer, like you need to get an answer, you either have to put pressure on yourself to do it, or you have to know the process by which you're going to come to that answer. And generally speaking, when you're writing a character, you want them to not have figured that process out already, because that's probably part of what they're going to learn in the book. And so you want them to have to respond to external stimulus and external pressure. So they will have to learn the process by which they can get themselves unstuck, right? So our characters follow the same arcs that we follow generally in life. But again, that's the reason we encourage you to go to templates so often when you need to find certainty. And so for those of you who've taken one of our classes before, where we bought you a copy of those discovery cards as part of the class, I highly, highly recommend pulling those cards out when you get into these stuck places and looking at the behaviors that the character is supposed to have and seeing how many of those behaviors you can use to get yourself unstuck. It's one of the reasons that I love those resources so much, is because they've done the work to align the personalities already. And if you can find some behaviors that your character is doing consistently, and you know, like, there are these 3 things, then go looking for those 3 words on the cards and then use those as templates to get yourself unstuck. Or again, go to the descriptions on really any personality test. I mean, there are some that are more valid than others, some that are more nuanced than others. And we use the strengths because we find it to be the most precisely accurate and have the least outlier behavior. But that's not necessarily what we're looking for. So check out the Archetypes book, go read some personality profiles, see if you can find your character, and see if having to force yourself to put a data point on a line where you say they would do this, and then you would know, no, they wouldn't, or yes, they would, intuitively, that can often press you into certainty. So the reason we did this video again was because we got questions about the intuitive book. And so I want to encourage you, if you have been reading the intuitive book and you also have questions, please do put them in the comments here on the video, or on either our Instagram or TikTok videos as well, because I'm double posting every time we do content, so people don't have to follow us in both places. And I just want the information to be available. So like I said, I'll put the link to those videos, the one that sort of generated this episode, in the show notes, and then I'm going to link this video on TikTok, so that people will get the long form answer to this, because I did a 3-minute answer that was really only just like one answer, because, you know, I have a hard time not talking for 20 minutes. So TikTok is hard for me. But yeah, so we're going to talk a little more about this in the coming months once we get through the conference and all of the archetypes content has been codified, which is both the most fun and the most frustrating experience of my life. Because trying to take the number one input brain, number four individualization brain, and be like, let's codify all of this 1,000 metric tons of data that you have in your head, has been interesting. And God bless the coaches, because holy cow, that's a lot. But I'm really excited about the content itself, and I'm excited to see what happens when we get through the conference and how people are able to respond to it. And then I think we'll start making some more public content. But I want to be able to release the content itself in a way that allows me to have a small group of people who are asking questions. Because I do find for us that when we release content that's new, like we release a lot of the intuitive content to the Patreon first, just so that I could be like, push on these, like ask me the questions, because the Patreon and our conferences and stuff are sort of the solidifying that we do, right? And so I appreciate all of you who participate in those, and we're really excited for the summer's conference and also for the future content. We have made some more videos. We have one coming up on anxiety. We have one coming up on, and then of course we have some myths, marketing myths, and I keep promising those, but then I have to make other content because people are still responding to the intuitive book. So here's hoping that we'll be able to get to those soon. But I really appreciate everyone who's been asking questions, and I hope this was helpful. And we will see you. Join us on the Patreon if you want. We offer coaching there. We do some very small group coaching or one-on-one coaching. We do content. We have topical videos that are on specific topics. One of those is coming up, I think, in a couple of days. And so hopefully this will be helpful to everybody. And anyway, I'm going to stop now. I need to go. We will see you on the next QuitCast, everybody. Bye.